Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty. Today we have a solo episode for you, and I am warning you, I am in a bad mood, and I don't apologize for anything I say in this episode. A guy cancelled on me 2 nights ago, and I'm not over it, and I'm pissed off. And this is probably one of the worst parts of being on dating apps, or actually just dating in general, is there are so many time wasters in the world. And if you want to piss me off, the fastest way to piss me off is to cancel after I've done my makeup. And I'm not going to pretend. I'm not one of those girlies who love doing their makeup. I have never, ever put makeup on my face because I've wanted to. And even in the pandemic, people were like, oh, now we actually discovered that we put on the makeup for the girls. I don't put on the makeup for the girls. I put on makeup for society. That is literally the only people I put because I'm meant to, because I should, because I look more professional, because of all the trainings that diet culture and the beauty industry and the fashion industry has trained into us. And I have spent years and years unlearning it. I forced myself to go on first dates makeup free. I have makeup free pictures on my profile picture. And yet, even still, we still live in a society that puts a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way. And especially if I'm not feeling particularly good about myself, not appearance-wise, because as we know, I don't really have bad body image days, but if I'm not feeling great energy-wise, or I'm not feeling really up for something, I do put makeup on to try to give me that little oomph. And I won't lie, with this day, I really had to pull everything out of the bag to really get ready for it, because I've not gone on a date in 4 months. So I really had pulled every ounce of energy in me, every resource in me to feel up for the date. And what's really pissed me off is I just went on Instagram 2 minutes before, and someone went, well, if a guy cancels, they would have given you a red flag warning sign beforehand. And I was like, can we stop with this? Because I am so sick of, rather than criticizing men for poor behavior, we look to the woman and say, well, why weren't you a psychic? Why weren't you a genius? Why weren't you a mind reader? Why couldn't you see the red flags? Why couldn't you see the warning signs? So fine, you want to go into the warning signs? The warning sign was about an hour before, where he said, oh, well, if you're really tired, because I'd been saying how I had 5 meetings that day, and he said, well, if you're really tired, we can do another day if that works. And I said, no, all good. I replied immediately and was like, no, I'm making it work. Don't worry about it. Is that a warning sign? Not really. He was giving me an out and I said no, and then he cancelled anyway. And so even if it was a warning sign at that point, it was 4 hours before the date, which is still too late to cancel. Now, things actually come up, but my mindset around this has changed slightly. I wouldn't say a lot, because I already had this mindset. I very rarely give second chances. And the reason why I very rarely give second chances is because in my over 10 years of being single and dating, not once when a guy has cancelled have they actually rescheduled the date. Once it's happened, and once it was because he cancelled because his grandma died. And because I was so worn down by dating apps, I was like, yeah, okay. And then 3 months later, he texted me and was like, hey, sorry, getting over the grief was longer than I thought, but I'd still really like to go on a date. So one time out of 10 years, did a guy cancel and actually bother to reschedule. Now, look, cancelling happens, things happen, things come up, sometimes you feel unwell, all of that. But if you do that, then actually make the effort to reschedule. Like, you should not be trying to go overtime in trying to make up for them cancelling. The ball is now in their court. They have to make up for it. Not only should they be picking the date, they should also be booking somewhere. They also should, frankly, be paying for the date, because they've wasted your time. And I hate people wasting my time. Like, it is the fastest way to piss me off. Can you tell? Because I'm pissed off. This podcast episode is just going to be me ranting for half an hour. I think it's the fact that I find it really disrespectful. It's basically, in my mind, you saying your time is more important to me. And on this day in particular, I had 5 meetings and I had gone out of my way to have a shower between those meetings, to put my makeup on, to get dressed. All of these things that were all 5 meetings were Zoom meetings I actually wouldn't have done for those meetings. And also, the reason why he cancelled was because he was a little bit hungover. He was a little bit tired. He's already had 3 coffees. I was like, grow up. I'm tired. Do you think I'm not tired after 5 meetings? That week in particular, I had 5 meetings every single day that week, and I had still made time for this date. And yes, that's on me, and I shouldn't expect someone to have the same expectations. But I just think if you are cancelling because you're hungover, you knew the night before when you were going out for drinks that you had a date the next day. Like, that's what I mean by planning ahead, by knowing that you were the one who put yourself in that situation. And therefore, if the consequence is now you go on the date and you have a little bit of a hangover, like, that's on you. That's not on me. Also, we were going to play a Scrabble date. This is actually one of the reasons I really pulled it out the bag and tried to rev myself up for this date, even though I'll be honest, I wasn't really feeling it. But often your first date in a long time can often feel like a lot of hard work because it's trying to get back out there, get back into the dating pool. And you don't have the recent memory of a good date, which then makes it harder to go out and leave the house, especially when it's cold, and meet a stranger. And actually, I say in the Selfish Romantic, your excitement to meet a stranger doesn't have to be high. That you can be dragging your feet the whole time you're on the tube getting ready. But once you're there, it often makes up for it. Because even if it doesn't work out, it's still a nice evening with a stranger. And so that's why cancelling is so annoying to me, because it's all the downside of getting ready for a date, being really stressed through the day to try to make it work, making sure I'm squeezing all these emails in so I'm not working late, making sure I can leave on time, making sure I've done my makeup. I mean, me rushing to have a shower because the first thing I'd done that morning was work out and I'd not had time to have a shower before my first 2 Zooms. All of that was essentially to make it work for him. Obviously for me too, but there was no respect in return. There was no respect of my time and all of the things, especially women, put into getting ready for a date. And that's where I just think, if you're cancelling 3 hours before, there better be a bloody good reason. And being a little bit tired, I would have rather he turned up and said, hey, sorry, I'm a little bit low energy today, but we're playing Scrabble. How much energy do you need for Scrabble? And also, I actually gave him a lot of credit for the fact he came up with an original date idea. That he wasn't like, oh, let's just go to the pub, let's go for drinks. We were talking about board games. He was asking about Wingspan and all these games that I play. And then he had mentioned he never played Scrabble. And I don't know about you, but I always thought Scrabble and Monopoly were the 2 starter games that everyone's played. And I was like, you can't have got to your mid-30s and never played Scrabble. I was like, we need to go play Scrabble. And that's kind of where this date idea had come. And he got a lot of credit for that. But in the last minute cancelling, and also the fact that he basically got me to try to cancel first, that lost a lot of my respect. And then, I won't lie, the thing that really tipped me over the edge is he then went, well, first drinks are on me if we reschedule. And I was like, first drinks should be on you anyway. You're the one who invited me out. I don't believe in this thing of men should always pay, but I think you should always pay if you're the one asking someone out. And so I was like, well, first drink's going to be on you anyway. It is coming down to the fact that when people are dating, and people are dating multiple people much more often than they were, let's say 10 years ago, we forget that these are real humans. These are real people whose time you are really wasting, and you're not actually stopping long enough to consider what's gone into saying yes to that date. Now, when I say all of this stuff, when I say being tired or being hungover is not a good enough excuse, I am very aware what I mean is it's not a good enough excuse for me. And when I say cancelling 3 hours before a date is not good enough, for me, all of this is subjective and someone else might be a little bit more lenient around it. But what I will tell you for sure, being someone who has dated very widely, probably too widely at this point, is there is not a time I have been more lenient around this where it's paid off. Because I do believe when it comes to dating and first dates, that is when you are trying to impress someone the most. So if you're already behaving this way, it's only downhill from there. And that if you are already doing that from the get-go, it's a warning sign, because there are a lot of time wasters around dating apps. We're going to go into time wasters in a bit, but first let's do a question from all of you, because I know you guys are going through the same dating woes.
Hi Michelle, you answered my sister's question in your episode on ghosting, and she directed me to that recently. I found it very enlightening when you answered a question about deleting messages and moving on, because I felt there might be something wrong with me for how easily I can cut people out who I don't align with, but it's actually a good thing. My question, however, is why do I struggle to keep interest in people whose conversation I find boring or lacking, but whenever I actually enjoy talking to someone, they then tend to stop messaging me back? Is this just part of the dating world, or is there something I need to be working on? Thank you, Jackson.
So there are a few things here. Yes, this is a very common thing in the dating world, and I think it's an experience a lot of people feel, whether it's on dating apps or not, of this, like, why when I like them, they don't like me back, but then when I don't like them, then they can't stop chasing me. And I think sometimes it is an avoidant pattern, because what can happen is when you reach out to someone and then they start being really keen, you lose interest, because if you don't have self-esteem, you wonder, why are they so interested in me? You can't believe that someone would be interested in you. And so therefore, them being interested in you is actually the turn off, because you don't believe that you have enough to bring to the table. And so you almost have this pattern or this belief of, if you're interested in me, that must mean there's something wrong with you. And I think this mentality is what often leads to people being scared off by safe people, or people who make them feel, to be honest, bored, because that's actually what is a synonym in my mind for someone who feels safe. Because someone who is a safe person actually is a little bit boring. The majority of life, if done right, is actually meant to be boring. It's only when you are used to intensity and drama, you chase these high highs and these low lows, but actually you don't realize that the majority of life is meant to be this middle ground of the mundane, day-to-day, boring conversation. There's one element of that. And if that resonates with you, then that is the stream I would go down. But if that doesn't resonate with you, then I'll also say there are a number of people on dating apps. I have never realized how many people in the world are so rubbish at maintaining a conversation on dating apps. And these are the people in my world, the guys, who are replying with, hey, how are you? Yeah, good. How are you? And in that world, I would just say get rid of them. Because frankly, if you don't know the basic things of how to keep a conversation going, is you ask a question when someone else asks you a question, and that's how a conversation works, and that you can't just reply to something with 2 words and expect a really great response. We always see it in people's bios where they'll be like, don't just say hey, and then you'll actually message these people and you'll say something interesting, and then they'll reply with such dead chat, and you're a bit like, okay, so you were going to be really judgmental and be like, don't just start with hey. Well, first of all, how about you start the conversation, not just me? And then when I actually bother to start the conversation, and I'm an interesting person, so like there's no dead chat over here, you can't even bring your interesting conversation to the table, then no, then I'm not pulling the extra legwork in this conversation to keep it going. Like, you actually want to be in this conversation, you actually are going to be investing energy, and you're not just mindlessly replying to these people on apps as if they're not people while you're scrolling and watching TV. Like, that's not the kind of conversation I want. And ultimately, I don't end up going on dates with those people. So if you are finding someone boring on a dating app, likelihood is you are bored by them. And then also, the way to weed out these people is get them on the phone. You'll find out in 2 seconds if they're boring. There was one guy who wasn't great at texting, and I was like, oh, maybe he's just a bad texter. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to work right now, but you can give me a call this evening. He gave me a call, and I'm not joking. Within 2 minutes, I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. And I ended the conversation and was like, hey, just want to be really clear and transparent, and I just don't think we're a great match. So don't think it's worth both of our times to actually go on a date, but have a lovely day. And I hung up. And like, some people might say that's blunt, some people might say that rude. Frankly, I don't really care anymore, because I just think at this point, why are we leading people on or telling people or giving them hope if you're not interested? And if you're getting on a phone call and you're bored within 2 minutes, then yeah, you're not going to have fun on a date. I think it's that balance. Question within yourself whether there is an avoidant part of you that questions whether someone's actually interested in you or doesn't believe it when someone's interested in you. And then the other side of it is actually, yes, there are boring people on dating apps. And I want to be very clear. When I say boring, again, it's boring to you. There is no person in the world who is the objective judge on who is boring and who is not boring. Boring is a very subjective term, and to one person, it could be the most interesting person in the world, and to another person, they could be the most boring person in the world. But if you are finding that person boring, that is likely not your match. And so, yes, get rid of them faster. And that's always the way I believe in dating. It's not about the number of matches, it's not about the number of conversations. It's about when you're talking to someone who doesn't match your morals or values, or even your conversation level and your interest, then being able to weed through that faster and trusting your gut in terms of knowing that you actually know what you find interesting. You shouldn't have to pull teeth to try to continue and maintain a conversation, and you shouldn't be putting more effort into the conversation than they are. I hope that helps. It is part of the slog of being on dating apps, but at the same time, the whole purpose of being on a dating app is to get off the app. And as I've said a number of times, and you've probably heard me say this and also write about this in The Selfish Romantic, but the dating app part is like sending invoices. No one likes sending invoices, but people like being paid. So if you like being paid, you send the invoice. If you like going on dates, then you go on the dating app. They are the most efficient way to find dates. And yes, there is some admin around them and weeding out the people who are boring, but I believe in the long term, it is worth it. Okay, so back to time wasters. I believe there are two kinds of time wasters. One, who just stay on the apps forever. You might swap to WhatsApp, but you're texting. This is a person looking for a pen pal. They have no intention of actually going on a date. They never make a plan for a date. And the second type, which I actually believe is the worst kind of time waster, where they book the dates and they last minute cancel. Before I met my ex, 4 guys in a row did this. Every single guy was so original, came up with the exact same excuse. At the time, it was COVID. All 4 apparently got COVID the day of the date. How many of those actually had COVID? I don't know, but I don't believe it. I think at the time it was the most convenient excuse that they could come up with, something that you can't really budge or you can't really change and out of your control. But ultimately, they were people who booked a date that I don't believe ever had the intention of following through. And this is why, if you think I'm coming across really harsh, it is why I am that way, because I do think that when you are wasting someone's time, it is disrespectful. And I think when it comes to time wasters or someone cancelling last minute, is to actually not communicate anger in the conversation. If you don't want another date, you don't want to reschedule, then what is the point? And this is where people will take different points of view on it. But I wouldn't communicate how I feel or how angry I am unless I actually wanted to resolve it and go on another date. Ultimately, why I choose to not go on another date is because if someone cancels me once, that's already annoying enough. But if I then was vulnerable enough to have that hard conversation of being angry and communicating my upset or disappointment or whatever word I chose to share with them, and then they rescheduled and then they cancelled again, I would then be even more pissed off. And so if you are going to give someone a second chance, then you need to be able to give them a second chance with no expectation and actually be able to lower that level of anger so that if they cancelled for a second time, you just go, yeah, I expected that. I personally can't do that, and that's why I don't tend to give people a second chance. I also don't believe in this idea that there's one person for someone and that you're going to miss out. And if that person's really truly meant to be in your life, then there'll be another way they come back into your life, even if it's in person. So how I actually reply to the person is I won't involve my feelings and I will just go, oh, good, have a lovely evening. And then if they continue to try to have the conversation, try to reschedule, that's where I will likely set a boundary and say, hey, look, I don't think this is a great match, but it was nice chatting to you. Take care. And that's how I end it. And that's how I ended it with this guy. Was I initially was trying to do the no worries, all good, hope you feel better. And he wasn't really getting the hint. And then he kept going and making up excuses. And I was like, I'm really not interested in hearing these excuses. You've decided that we're not seeing each other this evening. You are now not going to get me texting you while we should have had an evening together. Because that's the other thing they do. When they cancel, they then try to make up for it by being like, anyway, how's your evening going? And I was like, no, you could have found out about all of this on the date, but since you cancelled, I'm not now going to spend my evening texting you rather than us actually sitting in this board game cafe and actually having a date. So that's one thing you absolutely should not do. Wait till the next day, wait till the day after, and then reply to them. But with this one, I knew I didn't want to give him a second chance anyway, so that's why I sent a text being like, hey, look, I don't think we're a great fit. Take care. Was nice chatting to you. Have a lovely evening. And then ended it there. And then I unmatched him as soon as he'd read it and replied and whatever else. When I set boundaries, I want them to be as emotionally neutral as possible. I don't believe it is his job to take care of my feelings. And I think it is my job to take care of my feelings. And my reaction to this is probably because I'm going through a lot of rejection moments in my life at the moment. Because when you're really angry about something like this, it is very rarely about that thing alone. It's usually because it's a mixture of other things going in your life. I'm very busy right now. I'm very tired right now. I don't have a lot of energy to spend. And yet, anger is the one negative emotion that gives you energy, which is very lucky and grateful for this podcast. When I get angry, a lot of my creativity is born. This whole podcast episode came out of the fact that I'm angry. And so we can thank that guy for that. But I do think it is that thing of like, it's usually a whirlpool of a number of things going in your life. And you then being like, this is the last thing. This is the thing that broke the camel's back. And now I'm done with the world. I'm sick of this. So yes, there's a really big part of me that recognizes this is not all about him. But I do think we need to stop treating people like robots behind a screen and actually recognize when you're cancelling on a person, you're cancelling on a real person. Stop messing people around and wasting people's time on dating apps, because if you're not actually planning to get off the app, I don't care if you want long-term, short-term, whatever it is, but if you are on a dating app and you don't actually have the intention of getting off the app, then get off the app yourself, because it's not fair to the people who are on there. Dating apps were never designed to have pen pals where you could just chat and text or sext. Like, you actually should be having the intention of getting off the app. Otherwise, it's not fair to the people around you. So if you've been cancelled on lately, trust me, I've been there too. And most of the time, 90% of the time, it doesn't get to me. But this one really did. And you know what? I chose to share it because I think it's human. I also like to talk about this part because a lot of people are like, oh, you get so many more matches than me. You have so many more conversations than me. You're always going on more dates than me. And I was like, stop the comparison. You have no clue how many people I'm matching with. You have no clue how many conversations. You only see the dates I only end up on, but you're not seeing all these cancellations, because usually I don't talk about it because frankly, I couldn't care less most of the time. This one's got under my skin because I'm processing a lot of things. But I think it's important to share that I go through this too. I just largely, unlike this situation, but largely don't pay attention to this, because if you focus on this aspect of it, it will be miserable. It will be depressing. Instead, you should focus on the matches. Don't pay attention to who unmatches you. Don't pay attention to the dead conversations. Pay attention to the ones who deserve your energy. And that's where your attention should go. So if you're in the dating app game, I am here with you. We are playing the long game on this one, and it's okay to have these like moments where you're just sick and fed up of it, because ultimately I do think it's better that they exist than they don't, because it gives us all more opportunities and options when it comes to our dating life. So something I am learning this week, I actually just came out of a therapy session actually, and the thing I learned from my therapy session, which I'm trying to remember now because she ends each session with saying, your homework for this week is, my homework for this week was that I need to prioritize self-care. That I walked into my session this week and was like, I'm burnt out. And she was like, what does that mean? Don't like that word. And I was like, I explained my whole week and everything. And she was like, so you're overscheduling yourself. And I was like, I wouldn't put it that way, but true. And I've not been taking enough time for self-care. And she also said something which might surprise a lot of you. And she was like, Michelle, you're an introvert. You need a lot of alone time. When you don't have alone time, you get that feeling of being burnt out. And when she was like, what do you mean by burnt out? I was like, I just don't feel very creative right now. I never find it difficult to come up with content ideas, and I'm really struggling. I'm waking up and dreading the day already. And like, I have some really exciting things coming up this week. And yet when you're so past the point of tired, you actually can't even look forward to the things you're looking forward to. That's the point I'm at. So The thing I'm learning right now is no matter how much you know about self-love and self-care, you can always wane or not prioritize it. And sometimes it's just rechecking what you're putting into your calendar. And I've probably slipped a bit too far into saying yes to too many things without actually checking whether I want to go. And so I'm going to go into that. One of the things she practically did in my session today was she was like, I want you to block out 2 days in your diary tomorrow. So I have a day off on Monday and Tuesday, which is ironic because on Monday I still have to go into an event, but she was like, it's in the evening. So she was like, Monday day, do nothing. Tuesday day, do nothing. And I was like, great, I can do that. And that is me making more time for myself, because running on empty means you have nothing to give to anyone else as well, which is probably why I shouldn't be dating anyway. And as soon as he cancelled, I was like, I'll take this as a sign, as I probably need a little bit more time. So yes, I haven't been on a date in 4 months, and it's gonna look like it's another month before I head back out there in the dating world. But I am excited to get back out there when I'm ready, when I have time, when I have energy. Thank you so much for listening to my rant. I found it quite therapeutic, actually. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave us a review. They really help us. And hit follow and subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And we'll be back next Tuesday with a brand new episode.